Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to UCSC Silicon Valley Extension's new weekly webinar series, Job Market Insights. UCSC Silicon Valley Extension is your UC in Silicon Valley. We offer professional development courses and certificate programs for you to update your skills for today's job market, and we're the leading workforce educator in Silicon Valley. Our courses are designed by experienced instructors who are actually working in their field. We serve new college graduates needing practical skills, people in the workforce looking to update skills or change direction, and lifelong learners interested in studying with industry experts in the heart of Silicon Valley. My name is Nisa Dorrego, and I'm one of the academic program advisors in the International and Workforce Development Department. We partner with many local agencies receiving WIOA funds to help individuals who have been laid off or unemployed to receive training paid for by the agency to obtain one of our certificates. I've also been working on building out UCSC Extension's career service offerings. Today's topic is all about energizing your job search. We have an amazing career coach from our new partner company, the Muse. The Muse is the go-to destination for the next-gen workforce to research companies and careers. You've probably read or seen their advice columns featured on Associated Press, The Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and Women's Health. UCSC Silicon Valley Extension and the Muse recently launched a new partnership for the Muse Coach Connect services for our students and alumni. All of our students and alumni can receive 10% off Coach Connect services from the Muse website with the discount code that we'll be giving out at the end of the webinar. These services include resume review, job search strategy, LinkedIn profile review, networking strategies, interview skills, and more. You can find out more about UCSC Extension Career Services and the Muse on our website, and we'll share that link also at the end of the webinar. Now I'm happy to announce our wonderful presenter today, Jennifer Smith. She's one of the amazing coaches that you can choose to book services with at the Muse. Jen Smith's professional roots are grounded deep within corporate America. Her progressive global HR leadership experience spans 15 plus years across multiple industries, including Fortune 200 companies. Now she is a career crusader on a mission to support early and mid-career professionals in navigating the new world of work by resetting boundaries and igniting action to live their happiest, healthiest lives. Before I hand it over to Jennifer to begin, we ask any questions that you have during the presentation to submit to the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We'll then go over as many as we can after the presentation. If we do not get to your question, don't worry, we can follow up with you after the webinar. Also, if there are questions that you think of after the webinar is completed, please feel free to email us at extension@ucsc.edu, and we'll forward the questions to Jennifer. Thank you so much, and Jennifer, you can take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Nisa. Hello and welcome, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here today to talk about adding energy and sparking momentum with your job search, especially in the world that we're living in today with all of these uncertain and uneasy times. And with that, I definitely recognize that there is a lot going on right now from a health standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and certainly culturally. And so with all of those things going on, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today and sharing a little bit of your afternoon with us. So as Nisa mentioned, just regarding the questions in terms of housekeeping, if you have questions throughout, please go ahead, so you don't forget them, go ahead and put them into the Q&A, and then we will go through them and be sure we get your questions answered at the end. So quick introduction on my part. You can see this slide here is broken into kind of two main components in terms of work and then one main component in terms of life. So kind of starting over on the left, I like to share a little bit about my background. I personally have navigated multiple career changes, probably over 10 throughout my career. And so I like to share a little bit about that. And one of the reasons that I do career coaching today is because I know navigating careers is super hard. And so I feel like throughout my career, I always wished for somebody to help me that really understood it, that wasn't my mom or my dad. And I never really had that person. So now I do this work hoping that I can add that thought partnership and provide guidance and support for folks navigating their careers. So I started my career as a frontline supervisor with Frito-Lay, which is part of the PepsiCo umbrella. My first job out of college was a frontline supervisor in a potato chip factory. So I worked with the teams that make all your favorite snack foods. So Lay's potato chips, Doritos, Tostitos, all of the delicious salty snacks. And when I was in college, I graduated with a business degree. I definitely had no idea what I wanted to do. And certainly making potato chips in the middle of the night was not one of my dream jobs out of college. So I also worked the overnight shift. So I worked 11 at night to 7 in the morning. But I will tell you that I learned more in that job about running a business and leading people than I have in any other job throughout my career. So I was making decisions around safety and people and quality and service and all of these trade-off decisions that it takes to run a factory, primarily because I didn't want to be the one to call my boss at 3 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't make a decision. So it was a really, really great opportunity. I ended up working with Frito-Lay and Pepsi for 8 years total. 4 of those years were in operations across all different jobs in the supply chain. So manufacturing, distribution, a function called sales operations. And then I decided I really wanted to move into human resources. And so I made a major pivot from operations into human resources and spent another 4 years with Pepsi in HR. So altogether with Pepsi, 8 years. At that point, I decided I didn't want to move anymore. So with Pepsi, I think I moved 6 times in 8 years. And so I was ready to move back home. I'm from Western New York. And so lucky for me, a company called Ingram Micro was looking for a business partner, an HR business partner to lead and partner with their sales organization. And so at that point, from a supply chain standpoint, I learned everything from literally from raw materials to getting products out the door. And I didn't have that sales component. And so Ingram Micro and partnering with the sales organization really gave me that entire supply chain. After 3.5 years of working with the sales organization, I really wanted to get back to manufacturing. I love manufacturing. I love seeing how things work. And again, lucky for me, a company called Thermo Fisher Scientific has a huge manufacturing facility here in Western New York, and they were looking for an HR business partner. And so I moved into that role and spent 7 years with Thermo Fisher. My last role with Thermo Fisher was probably my favorite role, where I had the opportunity to build a college recruiting team from scratch. So build the strategy for the company, build the team for the company. And within that role, I learned pretty quickly that not just, college students, but a lot of people were having trouble navigating the job search process. The online job search process is different, and people were just having a hard time with it. And so one of the things that I personally wanted to do was to help people with that. And so I started freelance career coaching with the Muse, which I'm really grateful to be part of their Coach Connect platform. And then at the end of 2019, I decided to step away from corporate and start my own career coaching platform. So my own personal practice is through Flourish Careers. And then I also have a couple of different components of freelance, and the Muse being one of those. When I'm not working, I love spending time outdoors, exploring everything that Western New York has to offer. You can see this is my dog here. Her name is Tula. She's a 128-pound Newfoundland. She loves to explore Western New York as well. I'm also married to my husband, Jeremy. The 3 of us love getting out and traveling around our local area. So that's a little bit about me. And then before we get into the content, just in terms of getting a sense of the folks that were here, I wanted to do a quick poll just to see. So I saw the information for those of you that filled out your industry. So thank you for sharing that. But if you don't mind sharing quickly your current employment status. So obviously there's a lot going on in the world right now, and we're in a really interesting job market to say the least. So I'd love to understand who's here in terms of your employment status, and that can help me tailor the content. So you're currently employed, furloughed, laid off, or in between jobs and you're not working. If you don't mind sharing, that would be really helpful. All right, so wow, we have a pretty good split here. So we've got majority of our folks are currently employed. We've got a handful of folks that are laid off and a handful of folks that are not working in between jobs, and a small percentage that were furloughed. Okay, that's great. So there's about 50% of folks are working and 50% are in some sort of transition, which is actually lines up really well with the clients that I talk to and the clients that I work with in this space. I get a sense there's about 50% of people that are working that are thinking about a career change, and then 50% of folks that are not working that are really trying to figure out what's next. So, so it's good to see that that lines up. My objective today is to provide you with a framework to ignite the spark and get the momentum to create a purposeful job search. So most of the people that I work with, when they think about going and doing a job search, they think automatically the first step is to update their resume. In my opinion, updating your resume should really be one of the last steps. And so that's why today we're going to talk about the first step, which is to reset your mindset and create boundaries around your job search. The second is to reflect on your career and determine where you gained the most energy in your career and figure out how to do more of that in your future role. Third, we'll talk about creating a heart-based career development plan. So I use the term heart-based because that's what's going to give you the energy and the momentum to be really excited about your work every single day. And then finally, the last step in the process, once you know where you're going, it's time to update your strategy, differentiate yourself, update your personal branding, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, all of the things, and then make sure that you're articulating your value to your next best employer. So we're going to talk about each one of these today. Before we dive into the details, one of my favorite phrases, and this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, is energy at work. I have this quote on here because it's a foundation of my practice. And so I always say that work should really cultivate your energy, not drain your energy. So we've got another poll question here. And so this question is, have you ever experienced the Sunday scaries? So for those of you that haven't heard the term Sunday scaries, it's really that like pit in your stomach as Sunday's coming to a close and Monday, the work week's kind of rolling in and you're just kind of dreading it. You're super sad the weekend's over and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I have the energy to even tackle this week of work, let alone move into Monday. So how many of you, raise your hand, yes or no, if you've experienced the Sunday scaries? I know I have in my career. Okay, so 70% of people, I thought it actually might be a little bit higher. So we've got a handful of folks that never experienced the Sunday scaries. A couple of people don't know what it is. Maybe the Sunday blues might be another term for it. But 70% of people have been in a position where they experience the Sunday scaries. So this framework is ideally intended to help you not experience the Sunday scaries, at least on a regular basis. Okay, so why is this important? So, and I share this slide and this visual because it's really, somebody mentioned this visual to me about 15 years ago, and it has stuck with me for that long. And so now I start sharing this in these types of conversations that I have with people. And so most of the time when we are searching for a job, we are thinking of making a change, we get on our phone or our computer and we start scrolling those big job boards. We take a look at what's out there and we say, oh, like maybe I could fit myself into this job, or yeah, maybe this company might be a fit. And then maybe we apply to the job, maybe we get a call back, or we get into the job and find out, 2 months into the role that it's not a good fit. So doing this framework or executing this framework ahead of time is going to help you find that job that fits. And so to me, working in a job that doesn't fit or in a job that drains your energy is just like a princess, or Cinderella in this case, working on Wall Street. So can you picture, so this is literally a picture of Wall Street in Cinderella. Can you picture Cinderella in her white puffy gown or her blue puffy gown and her blonde hair walking into the floor of the New York Stock Exchange to go to work? So most likely she's gonna have to change, the way that she looks, change the way that she acts in order to feel like she fits into that job. And there's going to be a lot of energy that's burned trying to fit in or trying to pretend you're somebody that you're not just to get your work done. Another quick example that I'll share with you, this is kind of a heavy example, but it's a real life example of a client that I worked with. This client worked for a government agency that supported companies in the tobacco industry. So he worked for a government agency supporting companies in the tobacco industry. His father died of lung cancer from smoking. So every single day, this gentleman had to go to work for an agency to make the tobacco industry more successful when that's the industry that literally killed his father. I know that that's a huge, kind of a heavy example, but you can imagine the huge contrast that's there when you have to go and get into work every single day. It's literally going to drain your energy. I heard the term soul-sucking jobs many times in just this week, and it's only, Wednesday? So there are these situations where the job is just draining and draining and draining your energy. Now, I'm not saying that jobs are all about, going from scrubbing a factory floor to dancing in a ballroom. That's not what it's about, but I do know that there are practical ways to move much more towards a job that's going to fit. Okay. So the first step in this overall framework is to adjust your mindset. So It's super easy to get caught up in excuses, especially right now when the market is kind of crazy. And so what I would say here is that instead of telling yourself every excuse in the book, like, oh, I can't get a job, or I need to wait until the market changes, or whatever, what I would challenge you is to be the exception. So get out there and take some risks, ask some questions, be future driven, and really generate some positive energy around your job search. And this is not easy to do. I get that. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. One of the ways to actually do that is to think about approaching your job search with a service mentality. So one of the things that a lot of people tell me that they are looking for in their career is to have purpose. They want to have purpose, or they want to have meaning. And so one way to do that is to approach your job search with that mentality. So how can I help this team? How can I add value to this company? How can I approach this with a service mentality and be purposeful for these people? And so what's going to happen there is that your energy as a person is going to shift and change. And that team or that company or whoever it is that's talking with you is going to feel that service mentality versus you just like kind of like desperate to get a job. So there's going to be a shift in the energy, and people are going to feel that, and they're going to want to work with you. So that's the first step, is to reset your mindset. The second piece of this, or how you do this, is through your routine. So structure is a big deal. And so for those of you that have been either laid off or furloughed, work used to provide structure. So you get up at a certain time, you get ready, it takes you a certain amount of time to get ready, it takes you a certain amount of time to commute, you get out the door. Work provided that structure for you. When work is gone, you have to figure out how to create that structure. And so the best way I know how to do that is to dedicate time. And I'm not talking about 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, or anything like that. I'm talking about dedicated time that you feel that you can use towards your job search every single day. So if you're still, working and you're trying to navigate both, maybe that's 15 minutes a day. If you're not working, maybe that's 2 hours a day, whatever it might be, but it doesn't need to be all day, every day. The other thing about time, I would say, is that dedicate the time where you're at your best. So, if you get super tired late at night, like, don't use those 2 hours to dedicate to your job search. Like, use a time that's going to be really good and you're going to be at your best in order to make the most out of your job search. One of the ways that I do this with clients is that we literally get into a client's calendar and we take a look at their weekly calendar and we say, okay, what can we start doing? What can we stop doing that we're currently doing that's not adding value? And then what do we need to continue doing that is adding value? So thinking about all the different components of a job search, and then your time dedicated to those different components and everything else you have going on in your life, and figuring out what you can stop, start, and continue. And the other thing around time is that I would say that you want to dedicate quality time over quantity. What you're just saying before this webinar started, it literally breaks my heart when people tell me they applied to 120 different jobs and have heard nothing back. So that is not a good use of quality time. So you want to use your time in a quality way over quantity. And then finally, sparking momentum. So this is the hardest part. I get it. Starting is the hardest part for anything really that we do in life, even cleaning the house. You have to clean the house, but you just don't want to start. Once you start, it's almost, it's kind of hard to stop almost. So sparking momentum, the way that I love to do this, and I did this for myself when I made my own career pivots, is that I dedicated 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes. I was working pretty demanding jobs throughout my career. 5 minutes a day is what I told myself that I was going to dedicate to do something good for myself, either body, mind, or spirit. And so what ends up happening is, as you dedicate 5 minutes a day to one of these components, you become healthier and more well-rounded, and then the better you're going to come across to your employers, as well as this sparks momentum. So I trick myself with exercise because I don't like doing it, but I know I feel better after doing it. So I tell myself I'm going to get on that elliptical for 5 minutes a day. 9 times out of 10, that 5 minutes turns into 20. And then by, 3, 4, 5 times, times a week, I've got a pretty good workout regimen going on. So 5 minutes a day is all it takes to spark that momentum. Some things you can do just real quick. I had a note here, gratitude journal. So spending 5 minutes on a gratitude journal, getting outside. Nature is very healing. It's really good for you. So step outside for 5 minutes, take a quick walk around the block. The exercise piece is a really big deal. Spend 5 minutes reading an article you've been putting off for 5 days. So any of those things are going to be really good for your well-being. So after we have reset our mindset, we're gonna go ahead and reflect. And so this is one of my favorite things to do with clients, and we talk about the energy audit. It's nothing fancy. All you do is literally either talk with somebody or take one of your resume, take your most recent resume, and go through your career history and literally just start highlighting or jotting down the work that you did that you loved. So like what tasks, what people were you working with? Where were you working? What were you doing that really, kind of ignited that fire in your belly and got you really excited about the day? It could be something really little. It could be coordinating a project, it could be anything. Start to write all of those down, and then you start to inventory these responsibilities and these tasks that you were doing and the people that you were working with, and you can start to form that into your next best role. So once you've done this energy audit, then it's time to take an inventory of your own characteristics that make you unique. So assess and inventory your core values. So, what is your foundation? One of my favorite questions to talk with clients about is, what do you stand for? So when you think about that question, what do you stand for? That is a big, meaty question. And if you can spend 5 minutes a day thinking about that, it really gives a lot of insight into your values. And then how can you translate that into your career? And there's a couple different ways you could do that. Knowledge and experience is another component. So that's your experience built up over time. And there's a caveat here. Knowledge and experience that you actually enjoy doing. So some of us are good at things that we really hate doing. So that doesn't go on the list. It's knowledge and experience that you love doing. Then we move to our interests. So a lot of times people think interest and work have to be completely separate. Sometimes they are, but I would say that there are ways to integrate your interests into your work. One of the best ways to do that is to align to an industry. So you take note of your interests and then your signature traits. So what is your personality? How do you want to work with others? Do you want to work by yourself? Do you want to work with a team? And just making sure that your personality, you know what your personality is, and when you are at your best energy, and then finding the roles that are going to fit you or the companies that are going to fit you. So once you've done some kind of like backward reflection, it's time for some forward reflection. So visioning is a really big deal, especially when you're kind of getting the momentum and the energy to change your job search or move into a different role. So when you think about your vision, what are you most looking forward to, within the next year? Or what do you want to be doing 1 year from now? How do you want to feel 1 year from now? Just jotting that down and then keeping that front of mind. So I literally have it written on my Post-it note that's on my computer here. So I see it every single day, and it helps me move every single day in little pieces towards where I want to be 1 year from now. So that's reflecting. And then we move into reclaim. And so this is where we start to get everything down on paper. So we've, in a formalized way. So we've reset our mindset. We've reflected on all the components of our career and all the components of us that we want in our next career. Now it's time to go find those companies or those roles that are going to be a fit for us. And so this makes our job search much more proactive, where we're out there knowing who we are and what we want, and then finding those roles or those companies that are going to be a really good fit for us. And we know that's going to, in turn, turn into longer-term career fulfillment. So the best way I know how to do this is to create a heart-based career development plan. So a lot of folks that work in corporate America might have heard of SMART, the acronym SMART goals. So it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. I've tweaked that a little bit here just because we want to talk about work energizing you to heart-based goals. So first, you want to make sure your goal is heart-centered. It's in alignment with those values and those critical components that make you unique. Then you want to make sure your goal is energizing. So does it motivate you? Does it tap into your strengths? Does it fire you up every single day? If it doesn't, cross it off the list. Is your goal agile? So we are moving at a rapid pace, and we need to be able to iterate what we're doing pretty quickly here. It happens all the time. And so you want to make sure that your goal is something that is definitely nimble and that you could iterate if needed. Is your goal realistic? So again, when we think about careers, sometimes we put these big pie in the sky goals out there, and they're so big and lofty. It's like, oh my gosh, how do I even think about that? So you want to make sure your goals are realistic and they're baby steps to get there. If your goal is a big pie in the sky, it's probably just going to stay as a big pie in the sky. So you want to make sure that it's realistic and it's actually doable. And then finally, you want to make sure your goal is thorough and tactical. And so this is where all the details come in. So what does it look like? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? And getting it on the calendar. I don't know what happens, but when you put a deadline and it gets into the calendar, I don't know about you, but for me, it gets done. So there's something about getting it on the calendar. And so with all of this, your goals should really be authentic and reconnect with what matters most and give you that energy to move through your career in a really purposeful way. So this is a template of what a career development plan could look like. And before I share these details really quickly, we have one more poll question. This is, I think, the last one. But I want to know, so how many people have not pursued a job because they thought they had to go back to school in order to get that job? So you have a nudge in the back of your mind of something you would love to do, but you're like, oh my gosh, I'd have to go back to school, and you just automatically cross it off. How many people has that happened to? Okay, so 63%, so definitely the majority of the folks here. So 63% of you have not even pursued something, didn't even put any effort into thinking about it because you thought you had to go back and get another full-time degree. So, and that's one of those things that seems really big and pie in the sky and hard to do. And so one of the things that I would recommend to you is just to think about your career development plan in these 3 buckets. So, well, there's 5 buckets, but 3 being the action part. So your heart-based goal goes across the top. You definitely want to make sure you have an outcome. So how are you going to know when you met your goal? And I'm going to talk through an example in a second here. But the first bucket is experience. And so it's a fact that 70% of development comes from on-the-job learning or experiences. So stretch assignments, volunteer opportunities, freelancing. I didn't just jump out of my corporate America job and become a freelancer or become a career coach. I freelanced for a good 1.5 years to learn and get experience and build up my expertise before I did it full time. So there's a lot of different things you can do to gain that experience and ultimately move into another role. One other quick example here. So when I moved into HR, so I don't have an HR degree. And one of the things I was originally told when I wanted to move into HR was that you have to have a labor relations degree. Obviously, I didn't have that. Going back to school was not going to happen. And so I ended up moving into a role as an operations manager that supported a union environment. So I got really hands-on experience around working with a union, negotiating contracts, and I also partnered with an HR vice president who then became my mentor and helped me move into a role in HR where I've enjoyed 15 years ever since. So experience is the first bucket and the most important. Exposure is the second bucket. So it is a fact, according to the Labor Bureau statistics, or the Department of Labor statistics, that 70% of jobs come from networking. If there's anything that you take away from this webinar is that you must network in order to move into a new role, especially now because the online job market is completely saturated. The other piece around the exposure is that 20% of learning comes from feedback and coaching and mentoring and visibility. So exposure is a big bucket. So how can you gain more credibility and more exposure in the area that you want to move into? And then 10% of learning comes from going back to school. So online courses, education, certification, books, articles, all of the things. And what I'm super excited about that I learned is that the UCSC extension provides a lot of these shorter term education opportunities versus thinking that you have to go back to school automatically to get a 4-year degree and not even exploring whether or not that might be an option. So obviously there's different, circumstances for this. Like I really originally was in school to be a teacher, and I don't have a master's degree, so I can't teach in New York State, but I can do things like this, and that allows me to teach in a different capacity. So there's different creative ways that you can kind of get at some of those things. Ultimately, action is the #1 way to build your confidence, to get out there and try things, get the experience, build your resume, and move into your next best role. So this is a quick example of a heart-based career development plan. So I'm just going to go through a scenario here. So I've used this in other trainings and it seems to resonate. So pretend that we have a person, his name is Jacob, and he's been in food manufacturing. He's got a background in food manufacturing and specifically in quality and machine operating, and he really wanted a change. And so Jacob did an energy audit and determined that he got the most energy from decision making and leading other people in a more informal way. So because he had some decent experience in those opportunities, he really enjoyed kind of mentoring and leading others. He also did an inventory assessment of what makes him unique and found out that one of the things, what does he stand for? One of the things that was really unique to him that he's super passionate about is that he felt like people, especially his children, spent too much time indoors in front of their phones or their computer screens versus outdoors exploring nature and, you know, being outside versus in front of the computer screen. So he decided that he wanted to make a pivot into a leadership role in the outdoor recreation industry. So in this scenario, he did research. He narrowed down to the top 3 companies that he wanted to work for that really resonated with him and his unique values, that really ignited the energy that he would be super excited to go to work for every single day. And then he has these actions here in the 3 buckets: experience, exposure, and education. So I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but an example for experience is that he would take on an informal leadership position in his current job. So if he's currently a machine operator, maybe he can be the leader of his company's safety team and informally lead people through their safety agenda for the year. And he felt like he could do that pretty quickly. So he has that on there as a goal that he could do immediately. In terms of exposure, one of the companies that he identified he wanted to work for was North Marine. And so he wants to schedule an advice chat or an informational interview with the manager of North Marine to learn about his career path and how he got into the industry and started his own marina and learn about his career path. And he wants to do that within the next month or so. So totally doable and within his reach. And then in terms of education, one of his examples for education was to seek out and register for an online leadership course, specifically about giving and receiving feedback. So he knows that that's a big component of leading others. And so he can certainly do that, probably find a free course or 2 on it. And he wanted to do that within the next 6 weeks or so. So you can see that once you kind of get these goals on paper and then chunk it down into these 3 buckets, it gives you a really robust development plan that then you just keep it at your desk or keep it in front of you, and every single day do little things to make you, to move towards each one of your goals. And it becomes much more doable, much more energetic. You get that momentum going, and before you know it, you're moving into your next best job. Okay, so now we've got the last step, which is to reinvigorate. So we've reset our mindset set in step 1. We've reflected on our career and our unique characteristics. We've reclaimed our path. So we've put together a career development plan towards where we want to go. So now it's time to reinvigorate and refresh our brand in a much more forward-thinking way. And so the first thing I would say, especially now, is that you have to figure out how to differentiate yourself. And I know things are starting to open up and we can do some of these things in person now, but even online, like, how do you differentiate yourself online? And you do that mostly by adding value. So how can you help others? Again, that service mentality, approaching your job search and basically every single networking conversation with that service mentality is going to allow you to add value and help others. And it's also going to allow you to be memorable, which is a critical component in this work. So other ways you can add value is to connect people to each other. So maybe you have, maybe Jacob has an informational interview with the manager from North Marine and, realizes that the manager from North Marine could really use a marketing person, and Jacob knows a marketing person. And so maybe they connect there, and that's really helpful for the manager at North Marine. And so then he's going to remember that Jacob stepped out and helped him. And other easy ways, just help each other. If you've got a contact and they're job searching, like, help each other interview. Like, there's really simple things that you can do to add value. It doesn't have to be something big and great. LinkedIn is another great way to differentiate yourself in a pretty simple way. And so you can get out there, and as you're refreshing or reinvigorating your brand, let people know what you stand for. Let them know you have an opinion. Put out an article or a blog or share your opinion in different groups. There's a lot of different ways that you can grab people's attention and start to, kind of move yourself into a different role or a different industry just by using LinkedIn. So then when you refresh your brand and you update your resume and you update your LinkedIn profile and you update whatever other tools that you are whatever other tools that you have, different platforms that you have, you want to make sure that you are doing two things. One, you're updating everything to be forward thinking. So a lot of times when people reinvigorate their resume, they regurgitate their history versus thinking about their transferable skills towards where they want to go. So it should be forward thinking. And then again, you want to be memorable. So when you're talking to people and having conversations, share who you are, share what you're super passionate about. And again, if you do that audit, that energy audit and that assessment of what you're really excited about, they're going to hear that in your voice. And that alone is going to make you super memorable. Making sure you're consistent across platforms. So one of the things that happens a lot when I do resume reviews or LinkedIn updates with folks is that there's big inconsistency. So the resume says they want to do something, LinkedIn says they want to do something else, their blog is on a different topic. So you really want to try to make sure that your overall brand, when you reinvigorate it, is consistent and it matches where you want to go. And then finally, I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help. So this work is hard. I'm not gonna lie, I know that. I work with hundreds of clients. It is hard. People have a hard time writing about themselves. People have a hard time talking about themselves. People have a hard time kind of figuring out those themes and figuring out their transferable skills in terms of where they wanna go. And it's hard because you're in your head all day long, every single day. And that's hard when you're in that mindset every day. And so, don't be afraid to ask for help. Career coaches can help with all of those things. I know it was mentioned earlier that there's a discount for the Muse Coach Connect platform. There's, I think, like 70 coaches out there. And so there's people that love doing this work that are going to be able to help you. I think of it similar terms, like I am terrible at math. Like I'm not going to go and do my taxes myself. Like I'm going to hire an accountant to do my taxes. We have to paint our house this summer. I am definitely not going to try to paint my house. And so I'm going to go hire somebody to paint my house. It's kind of the same mindset if you're asking for help with your career. So this concludes the overview of our framework. Speaking of help, we pulled together 6 articles that I feel are going to be super helpful to maybe help you ignite that spark and further help you with your career development plan. And I believe these are going to be sent out to everybody with the recording. There's a worksheet that'll give you the framework of this call, a recording of the call, and then links to these articles as well. So as we wrap up, in the spirit of igniting action and taking one small step, I leave you with this question. So what is one, not 5, not 10, one small step you can take today, right now, today, that would make the biggest impact with your career situation? So whether you're furloughed, laid off, in between jobs, thinking of a change, what's one small thing that you could do today that would make the biggest impact? It might just be jotting down, one quick little thing, that came to your mind as we were going through this content, jotting that down on a Post-it and stick it on your computer so you see it tomorrow, and it helps you kind of spark and initiate that momentum that's just going to keep going as you keep at it for those 5 couple minutes a day. So with that, it has been an absolute pleasure to be here today. I would love to stay in touch. So here are a few places that you can connect with me. So I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Smith Career Coach. I'm on the Muse Coach Connect platform. You can find me there. And then I also have an Instagram account that I just love, and that is @flourish.career. So I would love to stay in touch and support you in any way that I can. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Nisa if we want to talk through questions or comments.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. One question was that we got a few about was that, yes, we are sending out all the PowerPoint slides and the recording to everyone, as well as those articles and the worksheet. So I got a few questions about that. So we will be sending it out within a few days to about a week for everyone to have. And then one question that came up is, what is a reasonable amount of time to commit to a job search?
Great question. And I will say that that is going to depend on a couple different things, especially with the market the way that it is today. But typically, I think the 6-month-ish time frame, and that just depends too on how much time you actually have to dedicate to doing all of this work. So job searching is hard. Networking takes time. there's a lot of, kind of moving pieces involved in that. So if it's a big job change in a market like today, I would say 6-ish months. And that's also going to depend on your industry, but that's a good amount of time to kind of think in your mind and to dedicate towards your search or your planning.
Awesome. Okay. And then another one is, what is the value of dedicating time to this framework?
Yes. So this framework, so one of the things, and I said this in the presentation, but one of the things that literally breaks my heart when I talk to clients, and I've worked with hundreds of clients at this point, is that they've applied to hundreds. The word hundreds appears so many times, hundreds of jobs without hearing anything back. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But the job market is saturated online. So I used to be a recruiter. I've seen what that looks like. You post a job, literally within a week, you have hundreds of applicants. There is no way one recruiter who has probably 30 to 50 jobs that they're working on is going to get through every single one of those resumes. And so doing this framework and going through and taking the time to be proactive and purposeful is going to help you stand out, one, and two, it's going to turn into longer term career fulfillment. So if you're really being proactive and looking for roles and companies that are going to be a fit for you versus reactively scrolling and just trying to contort yourself into something, you may or may not like it in 6 months or 3 months or whatever, and end up having to go back to this again, going back and doing this process all over again. So I would say that doing the steps in this framework will help you in both of those ways. Great question.
Thank you. And then another one is, what are the best tips for networking when changing fields?
Good one. So what I would say is you can use LinkedIn and find people that work in the job title you want. So say you wanted to go be a field account manager for an organization. You could go on LinkedIn and search field account manager and see who pops up. And if you have any LinkedIn's cool because you can see like people that you're connected to. So if you have any first level connections, obviously that would be the best place to go. But even second level connections, you could get a warm introduction through a second level connection and see if you can talk with that person for 15 minutes. I call these advice chats because I feel like informational interviews sounds too formal. So you could ask them just 15 minutes on advice on what it's like to work as a field account manager and, what advice do they have for somebody changing into that role? And, maybe you could do a job shadow or, something cool like that just to gain a little bit of insight, a peek under the tent of what it's like to do that job every single day. So I think that's probably one of the best ways to do it.
Okay, and then another one is, how can I do the service mentality when going to a new career?
So you don't have to, that's a great question. Good clarification there. So in terms of like service mentality, so you don't have to provide something that is geared towards the career if you're still gaining experience in that. It could be something like a simple introduction to somebody else. It's just like kind of listening to exactly what they're looking for and knowing how you can provide value. Maybe it's like, oh, hey, I just listened to this really cool podcast, and it's, geared towards what you're talking about. Let me send that to you. And it could be something totally unrelated. It could be about job searching. It could be anything. So just kind of thinking about and really listening for what the person is needing and having like some empathy and some compassion along, having that kind of two-way conversation and then figuring out where you add value, even if it's not, something super niche towards the industry or the role that you're trying to get into. Hopefully that makes sense. Does that make sense, Nisa?
Yes.
Okay.
Another one is how to update your LinkedIn profile, and then sort of related to that is how do you reach out to the people that you're trying to network with if you've never met them. So it's kind of hard to just cold call, reach out to others. How do you write to people that you've never met and make it and make an impression?
Yeah, great question. So what I would say first is to update your link. There's kind of two pieces to that. So updating your LinkedIn. So I'll just quickly, this is probably a whole topic in itself, but the most important pieces of LinkedIn are your photo, your background photo makes you super interesting, your headline, and your about section. So those are going to be the most important. That's what's going to show up on people's phones or whatever app they're using or wherever they're looking at LinkedIn. So those are the most important pieces of LinkedIn. In terms of cold emails, it's hard, but what I would say is personalize it. So, if you see somebody out there who's working in that field account manager role and, I don't know, maybe they live in New York City and you've just recently visited New York City, you could say something like, hey, I just was recently in New York City, visited whatever, try to make a personal connection. Maybe you know, maybe you went to college together. I don't know, whatever that is, but try to find something personal that stands out. So what you don't want to do is just send a generic message to somebody because they're not going to respond. So you want to have a personalized, really targeted message. The other thing is, if you're reaching directly out to a recruiter or a hiring manager, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to respond to you. So when I was a recruiter, a lot of times people would email me and say, hey, I really want to work for your company. Do you have any jobs? I'm sorry, but I don't even know what you want to do. Like, yes, we have 200,000 jobs open right now. Like, what do you want to do? I don't know. So tell me, tell me what you applied for. So a different way to do that might be, hey, Jennifer, I saw that you work for this company. You're a recruiter. This is a really cool job. I applied to this job. Here's the job ID number, the job title, any chance you can introduce me to the hiring manager, or any chance you could give me some advice on what it's like to work at your company, but being as specific as possible and making it as easy as possible for them to say yes.
That's awesome advice. Another question that came up is, how do you recommend identifying target companies based on core values? They've tried using Glassdoor, but haven't had much luck.
Yeah, so a lot of companies will list their core values right on their website or their mission statement. So I would suggest first going to the company's website. Glassdoor is a great place to look, but definitely the company website. And if you can, I think the best thing to do is talk to people, because a lot of companies, quite frankly, have great values written on their website, but you don't know if they actually honor those values in their day-to-day work. And so I think the best way to gather those data points is to ask the question. So go find some peers that work there and, send them a quick email or ask again for 15 minutes of their time. It's not a ton of time. And, two things with that. One is, when somebody responds and you do get a chance to talk to them, you can ask really pointed questions about the culture and the values and get answers really quickly. If they don't even respond to you, that's a huge red flag that they either don't like working at their company, they're not interested in helping anyone else, they wouldn't refer anybody else. So I always say, and I know this, I guess, from working in recruiting, is that the best companies that are out there know that it's hard to find really good people. And so when people ask about their company, if they're super excited about it, they're going to be more than happy to share about their experience working at that company. And so you really want to find those people versus the ones that don't respond or you get terrible answers from. But that's the value in those conversations, or even sending emails and asking those questions.
Thank you. Another question was, considering the LinkedIn profile is static and a resume should be tailored to each job description, how do you keep them congruent?
Great question. So what I would say here is that you have to have a general direction of where you're going. So if you want to go and be a field account manager, then the themes on your resume and your LinkedIn should reflect generally a field account manager role. Your LinkedIn doesn't need to change every time you apply to a job, but it needs to feel like a field account manager. Your resume, on the other hand, what you can do is take a job description. Job descriptions have all the answers. I'm not going to lie. They've got everything the company's looking for right there for you. Hopefully, if it's a good job description, that's another red flag. If it's not a good job description, be wary. So take the job description, take the language that they're using in the job description and put that in your resume. So if you have a skills section and it says, detail oriented, but in the job description, it's basically saying detail oriented, but it uses a different word, put that word in the job description or in your resume. So you want to, with your resume, you want to tweak the keywords and the verbiage to make it sound like you're already a good fit for the company. Another quick example there is just around words, but also tone. So a field account manager at, a really established organization is going to be Deloitte comes to mind, a really established, well-run, respected organization like Deloitte, or consultant for Deloitte is going to be much different than working at a startup like, say, the Muse. And so those two companies have very different tones, very different cultures, all of the things. And so you don't want to use the same resume to apply for both of those jobs. You want to make sure that the cover letter, especially too, you want to tweak your language and your tone to match the company that you're applying to.
Awesome. And then another question was that someone has gaps in their resume. Are there any tips on how to deal with that?
Sure. So I personally, everyone has a story. And when I was a recruiter, even a hiring manager, the gap in a resume doesn't scare me. Things happen, life happens. And so I certainly understand, like, not everybody has that same mentality as me, but that's the way that I think. And so there's a couple things, like if you're really concerned about it, when you do a resume, you could do a resume instead of like your chronological work history, which I always recommend doing a chronological resume versus a functional resume. But instead of doing your entire work history, you could say related work experience and then just articulate your related experience versus having those exact dates match. So the other thing too is a lot of times people put months and year in their resume dates. You could take out the month and it might not even look like a gap depending on how long the gap was. It might not even look like a gap if you just have years there. So if you're really worried about it, but overall, as long as you can explain it, and like I said, life happens and things happen, and I think it's part of your story, and it's usually a pretty cool story.
Another question is, if you have limited time, what's the best resource to use for job searching?
So I would say networking is going to be your best resource for job searching. If you have limited time, talk to people. I'm telling you, everybody knows somebody. And so like hairdressers, they talk to everybody. Let them know that you're job searching. You never know who they know, you know? And so I would say just talking about it. And also something happens when you talk out loud about your job search. You start to get used to talking about yourself and used to what you're looking for. And that's going to create that excitement and that energy even more. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So I definitely talking with people.
And another one said, if 100 jobs is too many jobs to apply to, how many is a good amount to try to apply to?
So what I would say here is that it depends. There's gonna be a lot of variables there, but when you network and when you really learn about a company and you really add value, applying to the job can essentially become a check the box. It can become an afterthought. It's not going to grab somebody's attention right away just by applying to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 different jobs. So I think the best use of your time versus clicking submit on all those jobs is to network, is to try to get your foot in the door. The other thing with networking is referrals. I should mention this. So the last, like referrals, if you can get referred into a company and get your foot in the door through a referral, that's going to be the best way. So for example, my last company, depending on the level of job people, if they got referred, a couple things happen. One, the employee that referred the person could earn up to $5,000 bonus if that person stays for 60 or 90 days. So $5,000, that's a lot. So if I'm that person, if I work at that company, I'm going to be referring all my friends. And what ends up happening with the online system, and this was just the software that we used, and the policies that we had, but if somebody's a referral, they literally, so 200 people apply to a job, that referral goes to the top of the list. They literally go to the top of the list, or they get a flag, and our company had a policy that we had to call them no matter what. So referrals are the best way to get your foot in the door. So instead of putting a number on how many jobs to apply to, I would really focus your time and attention on networking and talking to people that work
there. Thank you. Another question was, if you don't have that many things you can write on your resume, what can you include to appeal to recruiters?
Volunteer experience, I think, is great experience to showcase the whole person. If you've had any leadership roles within your community, I think that's a great thing to put on there. Sports team, so if you're a recent graduate and you were on a sports team or in a fraternity or sorority and you had a leadership role. Interest, I love when people have a little section on their interests, as long as their interests are interesting. I think that's really cool. That can generate a conversation, and and so the resume can kind of show a well-rounded person if you don't have all of that exact work experience. Classwork, so education in specific classes that are geared towards where you want to go, certifications, all of those things could make a resume really super interesting.
Cool. Another one asked, what are other networking resources other than LinkedIn? I know you sounded like a hairstylist just talking, but are there any specific sites or anything like that that people can turn to?
I think that's also going to be industry specific. So like for HR, SHRM is a great organization. They've got a website. Behance for like media professionals. So there's really industry specific sites that I think you could join. Also, or you could pay attention to. If you go on LinkedIn in the groups, that's another way to get really networked in a specific field or a specific industry. Facebook groups are a thing. They're becoming a really big professional thing too. You know, so that's definitely an option. Engaging on any social media. So a lot of companies are on Twitter. They'll start sharing, you know, stuff about jobs before they're even posted on Twitter. Sometimes hiring managers will go on one of their social media accounts and say, hey, my team's hiring, even before that job's posted. So I think like identifying those companies and then engaging on social is a great way. And then if you can figure out, just do a quick Google search on what specific sites, depending or are specific to your industry, that's another really good way to do that.
Great, so I think we have 2 questions left. Another one is how to evaluate which startup companies are good to work for. Many times it's not clear from reviews or really understand whether the startup company is a good company or not.
Talk to people. Go find people that work there or have worked there. That might even be a better indication if somebody's worked there in the past, and talk to them and ask really specific questions. So like really specific culture fit questions. Like you could ask like, you know, how is failure evaluated? Like what happens if I fail? You know, that's a great question to ask to really understand a culture, especially at a startup. So I would say you've got to get out there and ask the questions.
And then last question, a few people has asked this, is how do they connect with you on the Muse? And again, also about how much do you charge for resume help, other help for services on the Muse?
Gosh. Ugh. I don't know the prices off the top of my head, you guys. I'm so sorry. I think a resume and LinkedIn review, I think is $3.99. I can't remember off the top of my head, but so if you go on the Muse and if you go to Google and search Jennifer Smith, the Muse, I will come up and you can see my offerings and what I've got available and what the prices are. And don't forget that there's that 10% discount if you are a student or alumni at UCSC's extension program.
Awesome, thank you. I think that was it. The rest are pretty pointed questions that we can send over to you to respond to each of the participants. Okay. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great questions, you guys. Thank you.
So lastly, we just wanted to let you guys know again that we do have that 10% discount for career coaching through the Muse Connect. You can find it if you just Google the Muse, or you can go to us specifically, the ucsc-extension.edu and click on career services and then the Muse, and that'll link you right over to the Muse to find all the Coach Connect services. You can also reach out to us for the discount code for it. We'll also send, I believe, it out on the chat, so just check there as well to get that discount code. But other than that, thank you so much, Jennifer Smith. Thank you for taking time out to do this webinar and teach us all about this. And then we have some upcoming webinars coming up. Next week is data science skills for today's job market. And then the week after that is to be determined. We're still working on the next couple weeks out.